G'day, welcome back to the channel. It's 2023 and in the USA it's the year of Remote ID. Well, Remote ID came into effect, the first part of Remote ID came into effect 3 months ago in September of 2022. And that first part of Remote ID said that manufacturers had to start putting standard Remote ID in their drones. And it said drone manufacturers must comply by September 16th, 2022. That's 3 months ago, almost over 3 months ago. So as of today, January 2023, all drones manufactured after that date must have standard Remote ID fitted. Not as an option, not as something you can turn off and on, but fitted and not easily disabled. That's why the DJI Avata has standard Remote ID, and that's why a growing number of other drones, camera drones, have standard Remote ID, because they can't legally be sold without breaking this rule unless they have that standard Remote ID. Now, there is another form of Remote ID mentioned here, which is the broadcast module Remote ID. And you might think, well, what on earth's the difference? Well, there's one very important difference. The standard Remote ID, which all new drones have to be shipped with, includes the control station location and elevation. So this means it broadcasts not only the position of the drone, but the position of the pilot. And that means even if the pilot moves, that position must be updated. It tracks the drone and it tracks the pilot. Now, the broadcast system only transmits the takeoff location and elevation, not the pilot's actual current location. That's a big difference. And so this broadcast module Remote ID is something that you'll be adding to your drones as of September this year. You've got another 9 months to go before you have to add this, but it is not the same as standard Remote ID. So if the FAA are saying all drones manufactured after September last year must be fitted with standard Remote ID, you can't just bung one of these modules on and say job done. No, the manufacturer can't just do that. They have to provide the full standard Remote ID with the control station location and elevation. Right, now, when all this came about, when the Remote ID the way they were going to implement it was announced, I said this is a big problem. It's a huge problem for small manufacturers. Now, DJI and Autel and other big Chinese drone manufacturers that ship a transmitter and a drone, everything that you want in the one box, that's fine because they can build a GPS into the transmitter if they want to, and they've got the link to send the data up and down. And in fact, in the case of the Avata, they just said, well, you've got to plug your smartphone into your goggles. So we've got GPS, we can track you when you're walking around while you're flying. Well, that's very hard to do that with goggles on. That's the way that the camera drones, the big name camera drones work. But the little guys like Rotor Riot, if they build you a drone after the 16th of September last year, any drones built after that are sold, they must include standard Remote ID. It's not an option. It is a legal requirement under the rule. Has to be included. And it's very difficult to do that because if you've got a Tyrannus or a Radio Master or a Tango 2 transmitter, you don't have GPS in there. So how can you track the pilot? And you can't just plug your smartphone into your radio control transmitter and have it send the data to the drone. The mechanisms are just not in place to do that. So it is not practical. In fact, it's not possible to implement standard Remote ID with a bind and fly system that's running Fat Shark Avatar or DJI RunCam Link or with Crossfire, Ghost, ELRS, Tracer. This information just isn't being transmitted to the drone, so it can't be rebroadcast. So how are Rotor Riot going to sell this Hook version 2 5-inch Pro Spec built and tuned drone if they can't provide standard Remote ID, which they can't? Yet it's for sale. Look, add to cart. I've added one to my cart already. Add to cart. You can buy it now. So how are they handling Remote ID? Well, I go down here to the section that has Remote ID, and this explains what they're trying to do. Full marks to them for giving it a go, but I don't think it's going to stand up. I think they could be in big trouble if they try and do this. They say, the FAA now requires most drones flown in US national airspace to have Remote ID capability. It's not strictly true. Not strictly true because if your drone is under 249 grams and it's store-bought, you don't have to have Remote ID. And if you have a drone you've built yourself, well, then you don't have to have standard Remote ID. You don't even have to have module-based Remote ID yet until September of this year. There's still another 9 months before every drone must have Remote ID. So this standard Remote ID only applies to store-bought drones made after the 16th of September last year. That's not most of them, but it's they've got that a little bit wrong. Anyway, they say this drone, the one they're talking about here, the one that we're just about to buy, this drone product does not comply with standard Remote ID requirements and is therefore intended only for use outside US national airspace. So they're selling a drone you can't use in the USA. They're saying it's not for use. So it's an export-only model, one would assume. Although it goes on to say, such areas include FAA-recognised identification areas, FRIAs, and indoor spaces. Now, there are no FRIAs. So if you buy this Hook version 2 5-inch ProSpec tuned and built and tuned drone, now you can't fly it at a FRIA because there are none. So there's nowhere outside you can fly this legally. Okay, but why would you buy that for $740? They also go on to say, the other thing is, of course, indoor. You can fly it indoors. Who's going to fly a high-performance freestyle 5-inch drone in their house? Nobody's going to do that. You will wreck the curtains. Your wife will kill you. The pets will go crazy. It's not a practical option, really. Then maybe you could fly it inside a stadium, but how many of us have access to that? So this is a drone that you can buy, but you can't fly, according to this statement here. And then they go on to say something which is very, as far as I'm aware, I don't think this is true. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but from my reading of the rule and all the stuff around it, I don't think this is accurate. Because they say it is your responsibility, talking to the customer, the person that's going to buy this drone, your responsibility to ensure the use of this product complies with the remote ID requirements by flying outside the national airspace locations or by installing a remote ID broadcast module. Now, as of this moment, January 2023, installing a remote ID broadcast module would not fix the problem because it does not provide you with standard remote ID as is required by the FAA for all new drones sold in a ready-to-fly or bind-and-fly configuration that were made after the 16th of September last year. So just bunging a module on, it's not going to do it because it won't be broadcasting the pilot's live position. Not compliant. But the other thing is, the first part of the rule doesn't apply to you and I or the customer. The first part of the rule applies to manufacturers. It says manufacturers must include the standard remote ID as a part of the system. So Rotor Riot can't say, oh, it's your responsibility, talking to the customer. No. It's Rotor Riot's responsibility. They can't change the blame, change the responsibility from themselves to the customer because the FAA say who is responsible. And the FAA say it's the manufacturer that must comply, not the customer. And even if they did try and transfer it like this, the moment someone bought one of these and went out and flew it in a park, Rotor Riot would be liable. They'd be responsible because they have supplied a drone without standard remote ID that's being used in the national airspace, and that's against the law now. That's against the rule. That's against the remote ID, the first part of the remote ID rule. So I don't think they're going to be able to contract out of this. I don't think they've found a loophole. I think this is a worry. Surely they must have contacted a lawyer, run this by a lawyer, and the lawyer would have given them informed opinion. I am not a lawyer. I don't even pretend to be a lawyer on YouTube, but using my layman's, my everyday sort of, common sense brain, I don't think you can contract out of a law or rule that puts you under an obligation to provide a system that complies with a certain specification. Now, of course, I thought maybe they're only selling this for export. Maybe at this stage, it's only for export. So if you live in the USA, you can't buy it. But if you live in Australia and New Zealand, other countries, you could buy one of these because these countries don't have remote ID. It's not important. So I went down to the estimate shipping section here, which I thought if I enter United States, California, zip code, and get an estimate for shipping, it will tell me, I'm sorry, we cannot ship within the USA because this product is not compliant with the FAA's rule on remote ID at this time. But no, they said, yeah, there's 12 options. We can ship to you for this sort of money. No problem. So they are prepared to sell it into the USA in violation of the FAA standard remote ID rule, which is now in effect. So I would be very worried if I was Rotor Riot, that the FAA are going to look at this and go, you are in trouble. You're selling a product that's not compliant. You're violating the rule. We're going to have a little word with you. Of course, the FAA tends to prefer to educate first, so they would say, no, naughty, and this will disappear. Or they'll limit sales to export only. I'm pretty sure that's what you'll see happen in the next week or so. Once the FAA get back from their little holiday after New Year and drunk enough coffee and had enough donuts to get themselves up to speed, they'll probably contact Rotor Riot and say, no, I'm sorry, boys, you can't do that. Which is a shame because, as we know, remote ID is terrible, and any way around it would be good. And I applaud Rotor Riot for giving it a go, having a go, see how they get on. But it's not going to fly, I don't think. Or maybe they went to the FAA and said, look, can we do this? And the FAA said, yeah, that's fine. I would be very surprised if that was the case, but it could have happened. I mean, as I say, I don't have any background on this. Maybe someone from Rotor Riot can chime in and tell us, did you get legal advice? Did you pass this by the FAA? And they said, yes, it's fine to sell into the USA as long as people only use it indoors. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But of course, I have a feeling that the FAA is not going to be too keen to enforce anything to do with remote ID until September this year, because they've got other things to do. And the remote ID thing was actually forced on the FAA by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense, apparently. It wasn't their idea, it was security. It's all about security of the nation. So I don't think the FAA is that keen on enforcing something that they didn't even come up with, but we'll find out. And of course, it's not only Rotor Riot. I see our friends at Horizon are still selling a ready-to-fly drone. This is a drone, uncrewed aircraft, I should say, in FAA nomenclature. This is an uncrewed aircraft. They're still selling it ready to fly, no standard remote ID. Now, it may have been made before September last year, but eventually they'll run out of that stock. Will they still sell ready to fly fixed wing without standard remote ID? We'll only know when it happens, won't we? So there you go. That's the video for today. And if you're not a member of this channel, why the hell not? Let me just do a plug, because I'm doing a lot of work to try and highlight things like this and trying to help us push back against this rampant overregulation, ridiculous overregulation, and that requires a lot of time, a lot of effort. It takes me away from making videos that would otherwise have high view counts and contribute to paying my bills. So channel membership is one option. If you want to be a hero, you want to support the hobby, you want to ensure the future of the hobby for future generations, you can become a member of this channel. It's only $5 a month. It's less than a cup of coffee, and it could go a long way towards helping me out. Or you can go to Patreon. I've got a Patreon. Go there. The people who do that are the true heroes. I'm just the front man. They are the people who are working through their wallets to help protect and preserve this hobby. And my hat goes off to them if I haven't got a hat. But that's for those people, to those people, I say I'm very, very grateful for your support. And if you're not one of those people and you can't afford it, that's great. I mean, just enjoy the hobby. But I think you should thank those people as well, because they are going to be the people who help save this hobby for future generations. Because we can't rely on the FAA to do it. We can't rely on the AMA to do it. Can't rely on any of the national model flying groups around the world to do it. They're all slowly selling out for their 30 pieces of silver, looking out for their members. Their members are no longer the hobby. They're just a small part of the hobby. Anyway, I've rambled on enough for a day in early January. Let's see what happens with this. I'll keep you up to date. I'll be checking back on this. As I say, if someone from Rotor Riot can give me a shout or chime in the comments, we'd love to know. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and bye for now.
Overregulation is like a tumor. It's killing our hobby. It must be terminated. Now!